The atheist and the Christian view the world in very different ways. It is no exaggeration to say that their views of the world are diametrically opposed to each other. They give very different answers to life's ultimate questions, and at the most fundamental level, they disagree about the nature of reality, man, and the world. One way we can observe this stark difference between the atheist and Christian views of reality is if we consider what each view has to say about the nature of history, or historical eventuation. History, in this case, is just the totality of temporal facts. In other words, every event that occurred within time is part of the temporal series we call history. And both the Christian and atheist have something to say about this temporal series. For the Christian, history is simply the unfolding of the eternal plan of God. The Bible teaches that God created the world and sustains it. This God didn't just create the world willy-nilly, rather, He, in His infinite wisdom, planned out the entirety of history even before time began. This is what some Christian philosophers have called the eternal counsel of God. So every single temporal fact owes its existence and nature to the providential activity of this wise and sovereign God. In other words, nothing happens in history without it being predetermined by God. God's eternal counsel, then, is the ultimate explanation of the temporal realm. For the atheist, though, things are different. He doesn't believe in a wise and sovereign God, so he doesn't believe there is any rational or personal will behind the temporal series. For him, the ultimate explanation for why history is the way it is non-personal. The implication of this non-personal view of history is that the atheist is committed to a metaphysics of chance. What this means is that the atheist must believe that the temporal facts are what they are purely by chance. Now, it is not something new to accuse the atheist of believing in a chance world. When doing apologetics, Christians usually point out that the atheist believes that the world came about by chance. However, atheists are always quick to deny this charge. They would usually argue that just because they reject the idea of God does not mean that they endorse the idea of randomness or chance. The atheists are wrong, though. In truth, the only alternative to the all-controlling counsel of God as the ultimate explanation of all things is the idea of chance. To see why this is the case, let us first think about what exactly the idea of chance entails. By way of definition, chance can simply be defined as the denial of necessity. When we say something happens by chance, we usually mean that it was not inevitable. There was a possibility that it would not occur. And if there was such a possibility, then it was not necessary. A standard example of a random or chance event is a coin toss. If a coin toss always yielded heads as a matter of necessity, then it makes no sense to call it a chance event. Randomness or chance occurs as a result of indeterminacy. It is because there are multiple possibilities, heads or tails, that we can call a coin toss a chance event. If we think of the idea of chance as the denial of necessity, then the question becomes whether the atheist can justifiably believe in the necessity of the events that occur in history. The answer has to be no. The Christian believes in an all-powerful sovereign God that determines all historical facts according to his eternal counsel. Given this picture, there is a sense of necessity to the events of history. When a raindrop falls from the sky, it does so because God has determined it to do so even before time began. It was inevitable that the raindrop would fall at that exact time in that exact place, because no created thing can resist God's will. Given the Christian understanding of history, then, all temporal facts are, in a very real sense, necessary. But the atheist rejects this understanding. So there really is nothing that can supply necessity to the events of history. When a raindrop falls from the sky, it doesn't do so because a sovereign God has determined it to. It does so just because. There is no real reason or explanation for why it does. It wasn't an inevitable occurrence. It just happened. In other words, it happened purely by chance. The same can be said for any historical event in an atheistic universe. Now, the atheist at this point would probably appeal to laws of nature. He would say that a combination of laws of physics and various other laws make it inevitable that the raindrop falls from the sky. The problem, though, is that laws of nature cannot provide necessity to the events of history unless they themselves are necessary. Even granting that there exists such a thing as a law of nature, it is definitely a possibility that it can be violated. At least we have no reason to think otherwise. I mean, so-called laws of nature are definitely not logically necessary. There is no contradiction in positing their falsity. So without an account of the necessity of such laws, they do not help the atheist's case. So far, we have established that the atheist is committed to a metaphysics of chance. He rejects the eternal counsel of God and his predetermination of all temporal facts, and is thus committed to the idea that the events of history are instantiated purely due to chance. This is atheism's fundamental flaw. It is a flaw because such a commitment has various devastating philosophical consequences. For example, atheists usually ridicule Christians for believing the Bible's accounts of miraculous events such as talking serpents, the virgin birth, or resurrection. But from what we've seen, it is the atheist that cannot rule out such so-called freak events. In a chance universe, every event is equally likely. By chance, hydrogen and oxygen may bond to form water. By chance, they may bond to form candy. By chance, the sun may rise tomorrow. By chance, the sun may turn into a giant pig tomorrow. Once chance is allowed to govern history, and there ceases to be any kind of necessity in the temporal realm, then literally anything is possible. The atheist, because he is committed to a metaphysics of chance, cannot rule out anything as impossible. And as a consequence of this, he loses any foundation for science. Science has no place in the chance world. Logic and mathematics have no place in the chance world either. Laws of logic may tell us that there are no true contradictions, and that therefore a man cannot be both dead and alive at the same time and in the same sense. However, in a chance world, nothing rules out the instantiation of such contradictions. Likewise, mathematics may tell us that if we subtract 2 from 2, we are left with 0. But in a chance universe, nothing stops there being 5 apples left on the table after subtracting 2 from the 2 that were there originally. In the chance universe, anything goes. A further consequence of a metaphysics of chance is the destruction of all human rationality. If we live in a universe governed by chance, then all temporal events occur purely due to chance, and this includes human thoughts, desires, and beliefs. Rationality requires that there be a relation between reasons and beliefs. For my belief in X to be rational, that belief must, in a relevant way, be dependent on the reasons or evidence I have for X. However, if my thoughts and beliefs are a product of chance, there cannot be any such relation. If my beliefs end up being true, that was purely due to chance. Same thing if they end up being false. In a chance universe, I believe what I believe, not because of some rational thought process. Rather, my thoughts and beliefs are what they are purely due to chance. Here we can see the self-defeating nature of atheism. Atheism implies a metaphysics of chance, and this implies that all the atheist's beliefs were arrived at randomly, and this includes the atheist's belief in the rationality of his atheism. So we observe that if the atheist's view of the world is true, then his atheism is irrational, a purely self-defeating position. More could be said, but by now it should be clear that atheism's commitment to a metaphysics of chance renders it unable to provide the necessary preconditions of rational human experience. Once chance is allowed into a metaphysical system, human experience ceases to be intelligible. Things like science, logic, mathematics, rationality, and knowledge all go out the window. This is irrefutable proof that atheism is philosophically and intellectually bankrupt. If we want to maintain a rational outlook on life and the world, we must reject atheism.